Watch this.
His death was considered a catalyst for change across the country, from police reform to community inclusion, including here in Idaho. A look at just how much has changed 1 year after the murder of George Floyd. As COVID restrictions begin to relax in Idaho and stores drop their mask requirements, some are finding it a bit difficult to switch back to life before masks. There's no secret to the rising temperatures we've seen in the western U.S. in the last century or so, most of it within the last 2 decades, evidenced by the secrets uncovered in a U of I study of the trees in Yellowstone National Park. One year ago today, George Floyd was killed by a former Minneapolis police officer. It took nearly a year for that former officer to be convicted of Floyd's murder. And in that same time span, we've seen the continuation of a movement and conversations around the country about police brutality and their overall treatment of minorities. The rallies and protests sparked almost immediately after that pivotal moment, including a major moment locally with a vigil for Floyd at the state capitol in Boise. More than 5,000 people stood together that night, a crowd that covered almost all of Cecil Andrews Capitol Park. A theme from that vigil that evening, participants said they wanted to see change, systematic changes on things like diversity, inclusion, police reform. So, 365 days after Floyd's death, the questions being asked are, what does that conversation look like here? And did we make any progress as a community? For insight, Joe Paris spoke with one of the organizers from last year's vigil. We also got perspective from Boise police on how they looked inward to make changes in response to Floyd's death.
Thousands of Idahoans came together for a vigil last June following the killing of George Floyd. Born in that moment was a new organization aimed at working to elevate belonging and equity in Idaho. That nonprofit is now known as Inclusive Idaho.
Our mission is to elevate inclusion for minoritized groups in Idaho through diversity, equity, inclusion, our own programs, community engagement, and social change.
Whitney Mistel is co-founder and executive director of Inclusive Idaho. She says the visual marked a major event.
But the reason why we started Inclusive Idaho is because it was a moment. And we wanted to create something that was bigger and longer and more sustainable than a single moment.
Mistel says her challenge now is continuing the momentum of change after the initial wave of interest has started to fall away.
We see an uptick in engagement. And it shows that we sort of live in this ebb and flow, that folks pay attention and care when it's popular to do so. And to bridge to actual, real, everyday, tangible inclusion and safety, it has to be something that we're committed to in the day-to-day, even when it's hard, even when it's not popular, even when you can't post about it on Facebook and get 500 likes, So it's difficult for sure.
Mistel says there were, of course, good things that came from the vigil a year ago, but that major progress towards inclusion, equity, and diversity is still a challenge.
I don't know that I or anyone else can really stack up a list of things that we can say like this, this, and this, and this. Like all these things that we're marching for, we're seeing substantial difference in, which is a little disheartening. I will admit, like it is disheartening because it feels heavy, but it's also a big reminder that this is a marathon.
A major conversation stemming from the killing of George Floyd is police reform. Many cities across the United States look inward at their departments and what changes they could make.
Certainly this was an extraordinary time and an extraordinary event that caused us all to pause and reflect and really ask ourselves, what can we do better and what can we do differently so that something like this does not happen in our community.
Boise Police Deputy Chief Ron Weiniger says the department consistently looks inward at policies and practices, but the events in Minneapolis a year ago certainly led to changes here in Boise.
We looked at and examined our policies and our procedures, and we also listened to what our community members were saying and what was important to them.
Last month, Boise Police announced a series of department changes that includes the creation of a new training, education, and development division, a ban on vascular hold except for in deadly force situations, as well as reinforced messaging for officers to be apolitical and neutral. The department says they continue to look inwards at other changes as well.
We can always do better. and that is what we strive for. But I am grateful for the work that the men and women of the Boise Police Department have done every day in the past year and a half through some pretty challenging times.
For Mistel and Inclusive Idaho, challenging work to create tangible systemic change continues. The vigil a year ago continues to serve as a moment of inspiration.
Even in our frustrations and the difficult moments, it provided a lot of hope for us. And it reminded me and so many of the folks who look like me that even in a state where we are vastly the minority, there are folks who are willing to show up when we ask. There are folks who are allies. There are folks who are willing to support our work. And there are folks who will march arm in arm with us to get things done.
You know, Joe, I heard Whitney talk about this a little bit ago about kind of those events since then. And, you know, with the confrontational protests that kind of went back and forth through the summer, plus what would happen with the legislature this session, they have heard and talked to many people who have actually turned down jobs. Those people, black people, minority people, have turned down jobs because of the reputation Idaho has outside of Idaho when it comes to these inclusivity things. So I don't know that we made much progress since a year, but here we are a year later. Do we have anything planned for tonight?
Yeah, Brian, people are expected to get together tonight at the state capitol in Boise for a visual to honor the life of George Floyd and also honor other victims, as they tell me, of police violence. In terms of making progress going forward, Brian, as you heard Whitney talk about, they're hoping as things kind of open up, as COVID comes to an end, that they'll be able to make more systemic changes, not only here in Idaho, but across the country. It is a kind of time will tell type deal, Brian, but of course, the entire situation that we saw last summer into this year, complicated, of course, by a global pandemic.
That is true. So it's something we won't lose sight of here on the 208 and something we'll keep track of and see how this goes going forward. Thank you very much, Joe. Hundreds of millions of dollars are going to soon be headed for Idaho's schools. Back in March, President Biden signed the nearly $2 trillion American Rescue Plan. That's the COVID-19 stimulus package that gave most Americans a $1,400 check and bumped up tax credits for children and also earned income. Another part of that package includes a whole lot of money in emergency relief funds for K through 12 education. More than $122 billion is earmarked for the nation's schools. $440 million, I should say, of that is for Idaho schools and our 300,000 plus students. But before it can be spent in Idaho, Idaho education officials are required to create a plan to show exactly how and where they do plan to spend that money. The Idaho State Board of Education says their first and biggest challenge is to make up for lost instructional time over this lost year. As we all know, schools operated under abnormal conditions over the past year or so. Some kids went back and forth from online-only learning to in-person learning or a hybrid of the two. And because of that ebb and flow, there was a lot that fell by the wayside. Things like attendance, chronic absences were a problem. K through 12 enrollment dropped in some districts by 5%. Reading at grade level for K through third grade showed a 5% drop as well from the previous year. There was even a bigger drop for kids from lower incomes. The state's second priority is looking at the students themselves to check in on their social and emotional health. You can have a say in how the state distributes those funds. They're looking at public comments that will be accepted through next Tuesday, that is June 1st. You can do that online, and we do have a link to that in this story on ktvb.com. The final plan will be sent to the U.S. Department of Education for approval, and that should happen on June 7th. It's been asked before, but probably more poetically. To mask or not to mask? At least I think that's how it goes. Anyway, it's a question some have asked of themselves, and we wanted to ask of you. I'm sure there are a lot of other questions you're asking yourself these days, COVID related or not. We want to hear about them. Text us your questions and 208 topic ideas to the number on your screen. It's 208-321-5614. Don't have any? That's okay. As always, we'll take your comments too. And as always, don't forget to include your name and the hashtag the 208. For more than a year, masks have been a wardrobe staple. We don't leave home without one, right? But as more Idahoans get the COVID-19 vaccine, there are more stores that are starting to drop their mask requirements for vaccinated customers. But are you comfortable going into a store without one, vaccinated or not? That's the question Katya Stepovic asked several people as they were going about their day today. She found out the comfort levels for unmasking still vary.
I personally still wear one. I'm vaccinated, so I guess it's less of a concern. But yeah, I just feel more comfortable. I've just kind of gotten used to it, honestly.
I don't know if it's the right thing, you know? I mean, you know, I want to do the right thing.
For some people who have been fully vaccinated, it's still a little too soon to rip the mask off.
If a store wants me to wear one, fine. Sometimes I do wear one even if they don't require it.
I think it's just been so ingrained, like, wear a mask, wear a mask. So I've just gotten used to it, and I just wear one. When it gets closer to a larger percentage of people getting vaccinated, I'll feel more comfortable. Because right now we still have like the 6 feet in place, but I find it hard to like keep that distance.
No, I don't trust that, people are fully vaccinated. I would love to trust everybody, and if it is true, and then I would take off my mask. But other than that, right now, no.
While others have been waiting for this moment for a while.
Initially, it kind of feels like your guard's down. Feels a little, dirtier or something, that you don't have that protection. I've been vaccinated. I don't find it to be such an issue for me anymore, but if it's more comfortable for the store owner to have your mask on, I think that's just as fine.
An owner of North End Nursery, Allison Burley, says she too wants to make sure her customers are happy. But after doing something one way for so long, change can be uncomfortable.
We're all kind of nervous, and there's that awkward, should I wear it, should I not?
At the nursery, staff are required to wear masks to make sure customers feel comfortable. But for the customers, it's up to them.
It's taking us a while to just break free from that. We had so many problems early on. It was definitely a political battle, and we had people coming in to cause disruptions that weren't going to be shoppers. They just wanted to cause a rumble, and I'm glad those days are over.
Whether the mask continues to be a staple in your wardrobe or you've ditched them entirely, many say something everyone should do.
Be cognizant of other people's needs and what people are comfortable with. That's where we are right now as a society.
Now, unlike the state of Oregon, the state of Idaho does not require business owners to ask for proof of vaccination, but they do have the legal ability to do so. And the store owner we spoke with today, she says customers are getting more and more comfortable without masks. She says about 75% of them overall come in without one to begin with. Brian?
And I think it is that comfort level. We've been wearing them for so long where took us forever to kind of get used to wearing them. Now we're not really used to not wearing them. But if you believe in the science, which is what we're supposed to do, then I guess if you're vaccinated, you're pretty good without a mask. All right, thank you very much, Katya. Yellowstone National Park has been known for its long and sometimes extreme winters. But a new study from the University of Idaho shows the park's summers are also stretching toward the extreme side. No matter what side of the spectrum you land on, extreme or middle of the road, we want to hear from you. 208-321-5614. That's the number to text us your comments, questions, and even your complaints about the 208. Just be sure to include your name in the hashtag the 208. That way, we know who you are when we read a few of them at the end of the show.
Active weather throughout the entire day today, but it got a little wild this afternoon. Fortunately, nothing reached severe criteria. Cluster of thunderstorms that traveled through the Treasure Valley now moving out of the Treasure Valley, but we're still tracking the potential to see some stronger storms develop later on this evening. I'm watching this cluster right here to the south of Mountain Home, headed toward the Grandview area, southeast of Mountain Home along the I-84 corridor. Lots of lightning and also some hail reported with that one. Now, this cluster of thunderstorms out near Arrow Rock Dam also proving to be a stronger cluster of thunderstorms. That's just to the northeast of the Boise area. Through our Central Mountains, still very active here. Lots of lightning, hail, as well as some strong wind that could gust up to around 40 miles per hour. A similar story for this cluster just to the east of the Twin Falls area around Hazelton in the Magic Valley, bringing some small hail, could even get up to a ½ inch in diameter. All of this tracking southwest to northeast, and that continues through the rest of this evening until we see our sun go down. We lose that daytime heating, and we eventually will clear out our skies for a drier and clearer Wednesday in store for us. Magic Valley forecast getting warmer tomorrow underneath mostly sunny skies. Central Mountains, a similar story, low to mid 60s on the board with more sunshine in store. Could be a spot sprinkle, a quick shower in our mountain locations tomorrow afternoon, but nothing as active as today. Low to mid 70s for the lower Treasure Valley and around 70 degrees for the Boise area tomorrow. Here's a look at our 7-day forecast. It cools off a touch on Friday as a weak disturbance brushes by to our north, but then we begin another warming trend into the long holiday weekend. And by the time we kick off June, it is feeling like summer. For a fresh forecast any time of the day, visit ktvb.com.
All right, how many of you know what a dendrochronologist is? I didn't either until I spoke with one this afternoon. And this one happens to be a vandal working toward her PhD in geography at the University of Idaho. A dendrochronologist tries to figure out things like age and environmental events by looking at the growth rings of a tree. Through the Idaho Tree Ring Lab Unit, Karen Heater wanted to see what the rings of a tree could tell her about climate change. Specifically, summertime temperatures going back more than 1,200 years to the year 770. At 26 years old, Karen has grown up surrounded by the conversation of climate change. So she wanted to see what the tree rings in Yellowstone National Park could tell her about those temperatures and their relation to wildfires.
The North Fork fire, one of 10 in the park, grew by 8,000 acres when wind, very low humidity, and tinder-dry conditions in the forest combined to create a firestorm.
The Yellowstone fires of 1988 started with a lightning strike on the last day of June. By the time the snow fell and helped put them out, the fires burned 1.2 million acres that summer. And within the park, 793,000, or more than a third of Yellowstone, was charred, the largest complex fires in the park's history. That year, 1988, just happened to be the fourth warmest on record in the Yellowstone area since the year 770. That top hotspot just happened within the last 5 years, with 2016 the warmest single-year anomaly in 1,250 years. We know this.
All right, Karen, how are you, first of all?
Doing well. How are you?
Thanks to a climate study just completed by University of Idaho grad student Karen Heater.
Like beginning of May, yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah, it's pretty fresh.
It was a study the third-year PhD student started back in 2018.
The point of the study is to see how hot it's been over a period of time.
To contextualize, yeah, what's going on with summer temperature? Are the recent trends that we're seeing, how anomalous are they in the context of the last 1,200 or so years?
To find that information, Karen and her team had to look at some of the oldest parts of the park.
So we went around with these hand drills. They take about a 5mm pencil-sized core from a tree.
Karen said those high-elevation spruce trees dated back nearly 500 years. To get even older information, they also took samples from old down trees.
And we just took some cross sections. Actually, I've got them right here. They look kind of like that.
Okay. You're looking at these rings on these trees, and what are they telling you?
They're telling us that temperatures through time, they've varied and that things are getting warmer. It's a good analogy of trees are kind of like they keep a journal of environmental conditions through time. So with the blue intensity data, essentially we're able to see, yeah, the 20th and 21st centuries are really warm in the summertime. We see things like the Dust Bowl. We see the 1988 summer was extremely hot. That's when we had that Yellowstone complex fire. So yeah, they're recording all of these temperature anomalies through time.
And what they found is the hottest summer in Yellowstone in the last 1,250 years was just 5 years ago.
This reconstruction that I've done, it's an estimate, right? So based on the model, yes, our model places 2016 as the top ranking single year for summer. But I just need to put that caveat in there too, that it is an estimate.
But it's also part of a warming trend they've seen over the last 20 years, which has been unlike any other trend over that same 1,200-year time period.
So you gather this information over a number of years. What now? What do you do with this? I mean, you could go and scream from the rooftops that it's getting warmer. We all know this. What do you do with this?
So for me personally, just a little bit of my background, I worked in wildland firefighting. And so I'm personally really interested in understanding the relationship between fire behavior and climate. So kind of trying to understand ecosystem response, as well as things of how we're going to deal with the potential for increased fire behavior in the wake of climate change, right? I'm truly interested in if we're able to use this type of historical contextualization of temperature trends to kind of help us guide how we manage ecosystems in the future.
You can see that burn scar from that 1988 fire in that picture that she took while she was there. So why Yellowstone, of all places, to conduct this study? Well, Karen said she just happened to be there for some field study work, so it worked out. And if you're going to do some field work, what better place than America's first national park, right? She said she feels pretty confident in the results of this study. She and her team both all do, since what they found in the rings matched the temperature records the park has kept since 1905. But she reiterated, this is just a small piece of the puzzle. There's still a lot of work to be done, and she hopes this study will encourage other scientists to do more of the same, to search out more data points that go way back in time. And while drawing a direct line between warmer summer temperatures and extreme fire seasons, think about this. Karen's study did show the 2 decades of warming we've seen since the year 2000. More than 10,275,000, that is, acres burned in 2020. That's the year 2020. There were a lot of acres that burned, and it was the worst on record, a culmination of that warm spell from 2000 to 2020. All right, final minute of the show here on this Tuesday. Let's get to your comments for today's show. I'm fully vaccinated, but I ask everywhere I go what the mask protocol is. I'm still maintaining a 6-foot distance, but I do believe in the science, so I'm not wearing mine much. I feel like I've forgotten my pants, though, when I'm not wearing it, says Kathy from Star. A lot of people kind of saying the same thing, that they've gotten used to it and feel weird without it. Our family plans to mask if the establishment requires them. If not, we are comfortable not masking. My wife and I are both vaccinated, so we are moving forward to normalcy. Yeah, we're supposed to trust the science on this, right? And that's what Ryan does, and he and his family. But if an establishment requires you wearing one, then they have no problem going with that. I don't trust the unvaccinated to wear a mask. We've kind of heard a lot of this as well. Most of them are the people who fought them in the first place. So I believe they are maskless regardless of what the CDC says. We will continue to wear ours in stores until the vaccination rate gets significantly higher, says Laura. We'll see you here tomorrow.